Hey, deserving listeners, it's time for me to react to your comments from my videos from last week. Let's get to it. Brandon and Julia video. Liz says, it's interesting to me that Brandon's friend described Brandon's type as she seemingly described herself. Right, so Brandon's friend described Brandon's type as bossy, I think, and invasive, I think, and then seemingly was describing herself. Seth says, I am honestly in awe of how many people on these shows feel like they have the right to share their negative opinions or suspicions of their friends or their family member's significant other. Yeah, me too. Megan says, Brandon and his parents last season alluded to having seen and dealt with a side of Julia when they were on vacation and they wanted to keep her from losing her temper. This situation probably has happened before. Megan, I don't remember that. I don't remember that last season where they referred to that, but I think that must have just blown right past me because I couldn't imagine that Julia would have a temper, but yeah, we're starting to see that. Lavender says, a Russian viewer made an interesting point about competition for men. Considering my community has almost twice as many women as men, women see each other in a cutthroat way. I feel like Julia displayed these red flags in the first season, but people were too focused on Betty and Brandon being the bad guys. Julia's true colors definitely are showing up during the tell-all. Interesting. So you're saying, Lavender, that in certain parts of the world, maybe in Russia, that there are twice as many women as there are men, or at least a lot of women ratio compared to heterosexual men, and that there's a lot of competition for that. Maybe that explains why Julia has this policy. It certainly seems to be coming out of nowhere, but of course we know nothing about her history. Lucy says, Brandon should, 1, introduce his wife to his friends, but he didn't. 2, pay attention to his wife's feelings so that she feels comfortable with strangers, which he didn't. 3, stop his friend criticizing his wife and their relationship, he did not. And 4, apologize to his wife for his friend's rude behavior, which he did not. Agreed. Stephanie says, okay, now we need mugs that say podwife. So I've been referring to my wife, Stacy, as the podwife for years. And maybe I just started talking about it in a reaction video. I mean, I don't refer to her as the podwife outside of the podcast, but on the audio podcast, I've been referring to her. But yeah, maybe we can get a mug that say podwife. But I don't know why you would want a mug that say podwife unless I had a picture of her face or something. I don't know. Annie says, we can't all be podwives. Oh, so people want to be podwives? Wait, I thought I was, I don't want to say the word, but I will, daddy. I thought I was your YouTube daddy, and you're also pod. Let's just not go there. Elizabeth and Andre video. Angeliki says, coming from the Balkans, I do understand what corruption is and how easily you can get tangled in bad situations. And although I do not necessarily like Andre, I do understand why he would fear that his wife and her family would not understand the situation. Yeah. So in the United States, we do have corruption, but not at the level as other communities around the world. And for Libby and her family to have a hard time understanding it, I get kind of, but I feel like he's explained it pretty clearly, and I think that they should understand it, or at least be able to stretch their mind a little bit into imagining other societies that might have a lot of corruption in it. Allie says, I always thought that it was admirable of Andre to leave for that reason. Yet it seems to have made the family dislike him more, which I don't understand. Doesn't him leaving the police force due to corruption show good character? Yeah, me too. The whole thing just was bizarre, particularly for Libby, because obviously she doesn't have anything against Andre. The rest of the family, they'll turn anything negative against him. But for Libby herself, I thought she would say, wait, so you're telling me you had to leave because they were asking you to do horrible things? That makes me respect you more, and I'm really sorry you went through that. There was none of that. Now, part of that, as I think I said in the video, is because Andre has this persona that he puts across that he's independent and he doesn't have feelings and he's not vulnerable and he doesn't need any help. And so it's hard to detect his vulnerability and the need to reassure him or the need to have compassion for him. So he kind of creates the bed that he sleeps in. Daisy says, I wonder how the mob will react upon hearing this, because this being discussed on international television. Yeah, Daisy, I thought the same thing. I thought, so, but he's pretty coy about it. He's not naming any names. Obviously, he has been extremely vague about what exactly happened. And so I think he's making a calculation that, look, if I'm really vague and I don't name any names, I'm pretty sure they're not going to come after me. Also, he might think, well, I'm on international TV right now, and I'm in the United States, and if something happens to me, I have potential law enforcement that can help me because I'm not there anymore. I'm wondering if he's making that calculation. But yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Going on to the video, which I reacted to with their wedding in Moldova. Cultivate with Kate said, Cultivate with Kate. Do you have like a plant YouTube channel? I'm embarrassed to be a human being is my favorite line out of all these reaction videos. Right. So apparently I said something like, I'm embarrassed to be a human being. I remember saying that now. And yeah, I don't know if I've ever said that before. But yeah, I was in that moment embarrassed to be a human. Yeah, I think I started the sentence saying, I'm embarrassed to be an American. But I think it goes deeper than that. Anne says, I'm embarrassed for my cat, who is also named Charlie. Right. Sneffery says, Kirk's compassion towards everyone is endearing, but man, it is satisfying when he gets those rare moments. Well, Kirk's compassion towards everyone is endearing, but man, it is satisfying when we get those rare moments of him being just savage towards someone. That's how much of a douchebag you are, Charlie. You pushed Kirk to his limit. Yeah, that happens sometimes. But yeah, particularly in that scene, it was. Bill says, part of what was so disheartening in this situation is that no one stood up for Andre. No one told Charlie he was wrong and to shut up in the moment. No one called out his blatant xenophobia. They literally just cheered for him in the hopes to de-escalate the situation. That was disgusting. Yeah. Mona says, this kind of thing seriously damaged my childhood. Much like Andre, my family is Romanian and experienced a lot of xenophobia in the United States. My father and grandmother were the only foreigners in a tiny Midwest town, and the prejudice they experienced trickled down to me. Not only were many of my classmates afraid to get to know me or play with me or come over to our house, but my kind, sweet grandmother had no friends in the area. My very proud, narcissistic father dealt with it by drinking away his regrets and depression and took his anger out on my sister and I. I truly hope that wherever Andre ends up, he has a Moldovan, Romanian community for support. Yeah, absolutely. And you point out a pretty good point here, Mona, which is that when you oppress people, then the traumas get passed down to the children, and then you have generations of individuals with attachment issues or addiction issues or emotional issues as a result of the oppression and the xenophobia and the prejudice and the racism and the sexism that can be imposed on people. So, this isn't just something on a reality show where we're like embarrassed to be an American. It actually is the basis for a lot of the strife that we see in communities around the world. Angela and Michael videos. Courtney says, this helped me yesterday when I was having a terrible cigarette craving, and they seriously mess up my sleep cycle. Hearing you say that they don't help with your sleep reassured me that I don't need to go down that road again. Not worth it. Yeah. So, in that video I was talking about how with Angela, she was like, well, they calm me down. But I was saying, well, actually what they do is they just take away the withdrawal symptoms. And if you if you manage to become abstinent from cigarettes, you will actually overall be, have more well-being and less stress when you have this up and down of the nicotine and other things going in and out of your body. you're on this negative, overall net negative cycle. Anyway, you can listen to that video. But Courtney was saying that was helpful for me because I was craving a cigarette, and hearing this helped me to stop. And this brings up a point that I will often talk about with addiction is you can't white knuckle it. This is what in AA they call white knuckling, where people just be like, I'm just going to have willpower. You need to have reminders. You need to have people to talk to. You need to have activities that can help you to not engage in the habitual behavior. And he says, I've quit alcohol, I've quit caffeine, I've quit sugar, but quitting smoking was by far the worst. And you're spot on. Smoking relieves stress created by needing a cigarette. Not to mention it gives you an excuse to go take a time out, breathe, and sit outside. It can even be a social thing. It can feel like part of your identity. Right. So for some people, smoking isn't just the nicotine. Most people, smoking isn't just the nicotine. It's the whole routine. It's the focusing on your breathing. Just smoking, you're like, and you're sitting outside and you're maybe in the sun or in nature, or you're away from your desk at work, or, you're with other people, you're chatting while you're smoking a cigarette. All those things you can actually achieve without needing to be addicted to something that can harm you. Meekness says, Angela flips out if Michael even talks to another woman, and yet here she is constantly engaging in inappropriate flirting with the physician. Yeah. Lalala says, ew, this is not okay. So when Angela was flirting with the physician, ew, this is not okay. As someone who has been harassed a lot at work, this is totally inappropriate. If you're hitting on someone at their place of work, you're bothering and harassing them, period. Yeah. Girl says, very cringy, but I can finally identify with Angela. I, too, make jokes when I am nervous, and they are usually sexual and pushing the envelope because I think that's the kind of joke that people will laugh at. I have never and will never do this at a doctor's office, though, but watching this made me reflect on myself. Is that what I look like? Yikes. Better work on better ways to deal with nervousness. Yeah, so you're aware of it, and we all have our issues, and it's unclear if this is a problem for others, but just because people are laughing and placating does not mean they're enjoying it. We saw the physician with Angela. The physician at no point said something like, hey, stop it. At no point was he like, we don't know, maybe he's fine with it, but I imagine he's not. I can't imagine saying, yay, I wish that Angela would flirt with me while I'm trying to evaluate her body for a major surgery. I just can't imagine that's on his list of goals for the day. So but we didn't see any overt negative reaction from him. So, girl nettles, just because people are laughing, again, doesn't mean that they're enjoying it. Now, maybe you're, not bothering other people, but it is worthy of exploration for yourself. And you bring up a good point that it's a way of dealing with nervousness. So, if we feel nervousness and we're anxious, we're not usually very good at detecting social cues. So, having other options that are at least more likely to not bother other people is good. Sometimes just being differentiated and being like, I'm nervous and I don't need to do anything about it. I just need to be like, you know what, I'm nervous right now, and that's okay. Or just say you're nervous. Just be like, hey, right now I'm a little awkward, I'm a little nervous. Sexual jokes, unless you really know the person and that it's okay, I would refrain. Savannah says, same thing happens to people in the service industry and people that work at stores. When I worked at Safeway, the sexual harassment from customers was insane. So I don't know if this is true around the States, but on the West Coast, we have Safeway, which is like, it's a grocery store. And I cannot imagine that, but I believe you, Savannah, that you would get sexual harassment from customers at a grocery store. Like, what? Come on, people. M says, thank you. I am an RN, a registered nurse, and I hate it when men hit on me. It is super awkward. It is sexual harassment, and it is not okay. Stop sexualizing care. I don't know a registered nurse with over 5 years of experience who has not been sexually assaulted. I don't know a registered nurse with 5 years experience who hasn't been sexually harassed at work. Just stop it. We don't get paid enough for any of that nonsense. Yeah, and it's not a matter of pay. It's just not okay. Yeah. So it's interesting that we saw this Angela doing this to her physician. I called it out and said that's not okay, and it is sexual harassment and borderlining on criminal kinds of behaviors, or at least complainable to someone. Anyway, and I commented on it, and there were a lot of comments from people being like, yeah, me too. The Me Too movement was great, but maybe we need to expand it, or maybe there needs to be another hashtag like stop workplace harassment. It's not very concise, but I don't know if we have enough awareness, or I do not. Well, of course, I know our society does not have enough awareness about this, and it really needs to stop. People thinking they're being funny, or that you see someone that you're sexually attracted to that is working at a Safeway and you just decide to ask them out. People need to understand that that's just not okay. And men in particular have a problem with this. Of course, this spans all genders, but men in particular have been trained to be assertive in that way, to not understand what it's like to have that experience. And so if you're a dude, well, really anyone, regardless of gender, and you're single and you're on the prowl, and you are at some place where it's not if you're at a bar and it's a meat market, then it's probably expected. People are expecting to be hit on potentially, but you have to evaluate that as well. But you're out in the open, you're out at a Safeway, you're at a park, you're in a doctor's office, and you see someone that you are attracted to, and because you're always kind of you've been using Tinder, and it's just easier to meet someone in person, and you think, oh, maybe I'll ask this person out for a date. Think for a second about, has this person experienced this before? Given, this is empathy and expanding the mind and thinking outside of your own little cocoon. Is this person, so you're in Safeway and there's a cashier and you think that she's really attractive. And you think, oh, she's talking to me and we have some banter. Maybe I should ask her out. Think for a second and say, well, she probably has good banter with everyone, and she's probably attractive to a lot of people, and I'm guessing by that, the fact that I have this urge to ask her out, I'm guessing she has been asked out by a lot of dudes coming through this line. So now, that doesn't mean you don't necessarily ask her out. Doesn't mean it's off the table, but when you consider that, it might help you to make a better choice. It might make you, not hit on her. Or if you really had to, because I don't want to take away romance from people. There's a lot of meet cutes in the world. A lot of rom-coms start this way. That, like Office Space with she is working at the restaurant. And anyway, point is sometimes you meet people when they're working. And what do you say? Well, maybe you say something like, look, I'm really sorry about this. I'm guessing you get hit on by a lot of people. I don't know. And I don't want to harass you at work, but here's my number. And if you're interested, call me. There might be a way that you can do it so that it's less annoying to the person instead of just going right up to them, hey, I'm attracted to you. Let's, and really putting them on the spot. It's just empathy is my point. I don't know how you're supposed to hit on people. I have a pod wife. It's been a long time. But empathy, people, and think about it. Think, if I'm attracted to this person and I have an urge to hit on them, other people probably have too, and I should think about that before I just waltz over there. So, and isn't everyone on Tinder these days? So just see if she's on Twitter or on Tinder, and if she's not, then she's probably not interested. I don't know what to say. I've done episodes on this sort of thing. Listen to those. Kalani and Asuela. By the way, I've been mispronouncing Kalani's name as Kaylani. I made a bunch of episodes in a span of like a week and was repeatedly saying Kaylani. Or I think I started saying Kalani, and then at some point I started saying Kaylani. I don't know why. I realized it as soon as I heard myself saying it, and then I switched it, but I had already recorded a bunch of those episodes, and I think those episodes are still being posted. So I'm sorry to the entire world. I truly am. I pride myself on actually saying these folks' names in an accurate way. I even have a hard time saying Julia for Brandon and Julia because from what I understand, her real name is Yulia. And I come from, family, so I have three main lines in my family. I have a UK line that came to the United States in the 1600s and 1700s. I have a Swedish line that came in the 1800s, and I have a Japanese line that came in the late 1800s. And the Swedish and the Japanese line both had, when they came to the United States, they both had to change their names from their real names. So I have a great-grandfather who's named Wahei, but he changed his name to, I think, Henry or Joe or something like that. There were a lot of Henrys and Joes. And there are all sorts of people in my ancestors that changed their name because when they came to the States, people in the United States couldn't pronounce their name or refused to try. And so they just had to change their name. And on my Swedish side, it was the same thing. There was Sven and Beata and these kinds of names, which aren't hard to say, but Americans weren't familiar with them, so they had to change their names to something else. And I find that to be a microaggression. I find that to be at least mildly racist, if not entirely racist. Why should an individual have to unless it's impossible for the other person to pronounce the name, other people should give it a try. That's my name. If my name is Wahei, if my name is Shizuko, give it a shot. It's maybe you can't. Your accent isn't great, but Yulia, for example, is not hard for me to say. Yulia is pretty easy. Kalani, Larissa, Azan instead of Azan, and I think his real name is Hassan. Actually, from what I heard, people were commenting, and so this show I think perpetuates, or at least the people on the show, perpetuate this, what I'm going to call mild racism and a microaggression against people. Just think about that. Just think about there's a certain group of names that are basically Americanized and sort of UK influenced, and maybe French, Northwestern European influenced. And any name outside of that, if you don't have a name inside of that very small circle, then we as Americans, we're just going to change your name for you, even though we can pronounce it. Larissa is not hard to pronounce in the same way that Colt is not hard to pronounce, in the same way that Debbie. Larissa is not hard. Andre is, I love the fact that Libby actually says Andre instead of Andre. It's not hard to say Andre. It's a little hard for me to have that little, and I'm sure for Libby too. It's for Americans, that little is a little hard to do, but it's not impossible. You can give it a shot. I'm sure I butcher it every time, but at least you're trying, right? And in that way, I feel like I am at least not participating in the microaggression and mild racism, or just flat out massive racism, that my ancestors and many other people experience all the time. So I am terribly sorry for mispronouncing Kalani's name as Kaylani. And I was on a walk and I was like, I wonder what episode is going to get posted today. And I clicked on it. It was one of Kalani and Asuelu's episodes, and right away, and I said Kaylani 15 times within 1 minute, and it was just like grating my ears, and I couldn't listen to it anymore. Anyway, like with Asuelu, for example, I don't think I'm actually saying his name, and when I hear his family saying, they say Asuelu, I think, and so I've been trying to say it like that, like I think it's Asuelu. I think that's how they pronounce it. And also you notice that they don't say Samoa the way Americans say. They say Samoa. Samoa. I think it might be a little a thing in there, like Samoa. So again, it's a little harder, but it's not impossible. And I think that it's inviting, and I think it's accurate. Like one of the things that bothers me, I won't go down. Anyway, Prussia for Kalani and Asuelu, Kalani and Asuelu from Samoa. Prussia says, something that doesn't get mentioned is that Kalani and Asuelu are on a TV show, so his family may be assuming they are now big-time celebrities making lots of money. I heard 90 Day cast members don't actually earn that much. Asuelu's family may not understand this, though, and think they are being selfish. Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't considered that they're like, well, look, you're on a TV show, you must be rich. But still, I imagine that once they told them their financial situation, they would understand. Lavender, good old Lavender says, what's sad is that the mom and the two sisters have been living in the U.S. for years. So it's not like they can use the I sacrifice to send you abroad argument on him. Yeah, I wondered about that too. The sharing money with your parents thing usually is sending money back to the homeland, but they live in the States too. So what's going on there? You know, I don't know. Janice says, oh my God, I think I actually get it now. Is differentiation similar to what they call using the wise mind in the world of DBT therapy? I've been trying to figure out what Dr. Honda means for the last year by differentiation. Everyone seems to use a different word, but the gist seems to be the same. I actually say to myself, differentiation. She spells it out. Sometimes now when I am in a stressful moment and I need to remind myself to separate my emotions. Thanks for the thorough explanation. Yeah, Janice. So you're pointing out something that a lot of people in the know regarding theory realize very quickly is that various different theoretical camps will use the same word or use different words for the same thing, or slightly, the wise mind is different than differentiation, but it is very similar. In psychology, one thing, one experience or one conceptualization of the human experience will have literally 50 different words for it in various different theories, and so it gets kind of confusing. And it's sort of annoying because imagine in the medical world with cancer, for example, imagine if different physicians had a different word for cancer and a slightly different conceptualization of what cancer was. It gets confusing. But in the psychology world, we love to invent new theories and new takes on things instead of amending the primary theory, which we don't really have. And there's pros and cons there. Colt and Jess video. Chanel says, fire person reminds me of the good old hair cutter person. Right. So I said fire person and, I say hair cutter person. I don't know what's wrong with my brain, but fire person was the best thing I could come up with, the most accurate term. What term I was supposed? I think the podwife said I'm supposed to say firefighter, right? Firefighter, because you can't say fireman because there's multiple genders. So I think I just said fire person. But communication is understanding. So if you know what I mean by fire person, then and hair cutter person, then shouldn't we be cool? Nix says, thank you, Dr. Honda, for talking about the change in parent-child relationships when you reach adulthood. I'm fortunate enough to have gotten a way better relationship with my mother now that I'm an adult since the dynamic changed from parent-child to friends. Yeah, good for you, Nix. Real Housewives. People, Real Housewives. I'm finally able to watch it. The girl does the robot says, stop. Stop it right now. Is it my birthday? Is it Christmas? What gift is this, Dr. Honda? I am out of breath. I cannot breathe. I'm excited. I'm not ready. I'm so ready. May 26, 2021. Best day ever. Let's let the record show it. E. So I think the girl does the robot is really excited about me watching Real Housewives and reacting to it. A lot of people have been asking me to do it for a long time. And I think I have time to do it. So we'll see how that goes. But, it sounds like there's some interesting things to get into on that show. Better Days says, Kirk, prepare for all the triangulation. Okay, I will. Couples therapy. Yuri says, oh my God, I have been waiting so long for you to do couples therapy again. Thank you so much. This is my favorite reaction video series. Yeah, it's really exciting for me to watch that show too. Sometimes I wonder if anyone's interested though, because it's so technical, but some of you like it. Jolene says, my ex would never understand about sexuality. I didn't want to have sex with someone that was mean to me all the time. Yeah, absolutely. Good old Lavender says, this guy, Mao, I think, isn't triggering to me, just a bit exhausting. My dog is barking. Mao is just a bit exhausting. I couldn't imagine being friends with him. The worst advice I've seen for a low libido person is to keep having sex even if you're upset or unwilling. I think Esther Perel is a main proponent of this, and it bugs me to no end considering the stereotype is that men want more sex while women don't. I dated a guy who didn't know how to show his emotions outside of sex, meaning if he was angry, sex, excited, sex, scared, sex, etc. Yeah, you're seeing a lot of things in this, Lavender. One being that, this is an awful knee-jerk reaction and if Esther Perel is saying this, it's not okay to look at the low libido person and say, look, just deal with it. Now with some low libido people, might that be helpful? Yeah, I could imagine, but just blanketly applying that to people is irresponsible. There's a lot of reasons why people would have low libido: asexuality, demisexuality, trauma. They don't like the way the other person has sex, sex negativity. There's just, body shame, trauma, just various different reasons why you would have low libido. And just saying, look, just deal with it is like just shaking a client and saying, stop it, which is just not okay and potentially really harmful. Absolutely. I mean, people with low libido are already shaming themselves, and to basically say, just stop it is harmful. Yeah, well, okay. Well, that does it for that episode. By the way, Podwife designed this shirt. You can get it on the link below. I like the brown with this, but there's a lot of different colors you can get. And of course, you have mugs and other sorts of things. And take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.